I have it. Okay, there you go. Before we get started, I have an announcement to make. It's a very important day in Virginia, in the USA, as Senator Adam Ebbin turns one more year old. Happy birthday, Senator Ebbin. Happy birthday. So everybody can wish him happy birthday after this is over. Okay, now we're going to get serious.
That was serious.
That was very serious.
Okay, Mr. Director, please introduce the meeting's topics today.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Madam Vice Chair, Hal Greer, the Staff Director of JLARC. We have 5 items on this morning's agenda. First, we'll present the findings from our review of correctional education in Virginia. We'll then provide you with a presentation on demographic trends in the state and their policy implications. Next, JLARC staff and the state's Chief Information Officer will provide you with an update on VETA. We'll present the highlights from our annual state spending report, and then finally, staff will briefly present the highlights from the annual Economic Development Incentives report. Mr. Chairman, now on to correctional education. We were not sure what we were going to find when we began this review. We haven't reviewed the corrections education program before. But after months of observing classes, interviewing principals, teachers, and wardens at prisons all over the state, we came away quite impressed with how seriously corrections takes this educational responsibility, how committed the administrators and teachers are to delivering a quality education program, and how good they are at what they do. There are, however, certainly challenges with delivering an educational program in a correctional system, and there's more demand for educational services than there is capacity to provide them, and you'll hear more about these issues in a moment. I'd like to thank Director Dodson and the leadership team at the central office, as well as the research staff who took time to share data that allowed us to assess the impact of the program. I want to thank the wardens who gave us great access to the prisons, and to thank all of the education personnel in the prisons around the state and in the central office who took time to meet with the study team and help them to better understand the program. And finally, I'd like to thank the sheriffs and the regional jail superintendents who helped us to gain an understanding of the educational programs provided in the jails. Tracy Smith oversaw the study, and Drew Dickinson was the project leader. Introduce Drew. Drew?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission.
Good morning.
As Hal mentioned, my name is Drew Dickinson. I was the project leader for our review of Virginia's correctional education programs. I have quite a bit of content to get through, so I plan to move relatively quickly through the slides.
That'd be good.
But if you have any questions, though, just let me know. The study comes from a commission resolution that directed us to review various aspects of Virginia's correctional education programs, including their availability, design, alignment with labor market needs, and participant outcomes. We were also asked to evaluate the feasibility of expanding educational programs for inmates in local and regional jails. Slide 3 summarizes our team's primary research activities, which included over 100 interviews, site visits to 6 correctional facilities, surveys of DOC facility staff and jail officials, and analyses of DOC data. You can find more information on our study methods in Appendix B of the report. The next 2 slides summarize our key findings. We found that recent participants in DOC's educational programs had better employment and rearrest outcomes shortly after release than non-participants. A small proportion of DOC inmates participate in educational programs, and demand significantly exceeds capacity. Considering recidivism risk in its enrollment decisions would help DOC more efficiently use its limited educational resources. And DOC should ensure that the adult basic education program appropriately balances GED attainment with improvement among inmates at lower academic levels. We also found that the effectiveness of DOC's CTE programs is undermined by a lack of connection with job opportunities and frequent transfers. To expand post-secondary programming, DOC Central Office needs a more active role in program administration. Addressing DOC security and teaching staff vacancies, IT maintenance problems, and budgeting issues would improve access to and the effectiveness of DOC's educational programs. And most jails reported providing some educational programs, but shorter incarcerations make their expansion less cost-effective than at DOC facilities. Mr. Chairman, I'll start off with some high-level background on correctional education. State law specifies that a core purpose of correctional facilities is to train and educate inmates, and that educational programs are intended to assist prisoners in the successful transition to free society and gainful employment. DOC also intends for these programs to reduce inmates' recidivism risk, and this goal aligns with national research. DOC is required to provide a range of educational programs, including adult basic education, career and technical education, and post-secondary education. State law also mandates a functional literacy program to teach inmates the educational skills necessary to function independently in society. As of February, DOC housed over 22,700 inmates across its 37 major facilities. And I know this slide is a bit difficult to read, but we wanted to show you both the number of DOC facilities as well as how they vary in terms of the number of inmates that they house. According to national research, effective correctional programs focus on inmates at high risk of reoffending. They also target each inmate's specific criminogenic risk factors. These are those factors that, if addressed, can reduce their likelihood of reoffending. DOC uses an assessment tool called COMPASS to estimate each inmate's risk of reoffending and to identify their specific programming needs to reduce that risk. Based on this assessment, DOC has determined that about 40% of inmates need educational programs to reduce the risk of reoffending. Each fiscal year, DOC receives state general funds specifically for its educational programs. In fiscal year 2025, total appropriations for correctional education were $36.8 million, which is about 2% of DOC's total budget. Slide 13 provides an overview of DOC's three main types of educational programs: adult basic education, career and technical education, and post-secondary programs. DOC provides adult basic education programs and CTE programs directly to inmates through its instructors, and it partners with higher education institutions to provide its post-secondary programs. I'll discuss each of these three program types in more detail later in the presentation, but I wanted to point out that about 20% of DOC inmates are enrolled in an educational program at a time. Before I turn to the next section, it's important to note that various factors make providing educational programs in a correctional setting more challenging than in the community. First and foremost, educational programs are heavily reliant on a facility having adequate security staffing. If a facility does not have enough correctional officers, it becomes very difficult to implement educational programs safely. This is important context because DOC is experiencing significant vacancy issues among its correctional officer positions, particularly at some facilities, and had over 1,500 vacancies as of July. Operationally, facilities may have to implement lockdowns, which can also disrupt programs. And inmates may also have other more pressing needs that need to be prioritized before they can actively engage in educational programs. If you're interested, we have more information on some of these important considerations in chapters 1 and 5. Mr. Chairman, I'll pause here in case there are any questions.
Do you have a question? Yes, sir. Senator Eben.
Thank you. You had mentioned, I believe, that 40%, it was estimated that 40% of the inmates need training. And I was just wondering, do we know what percentage of the inmates are getting training?
Excuse me, Senator Evans. Yes, so about, it's a small proportion, I'd say about 16% of inmates released in 2024 participated in a CTE program. I think that's about right. But it's about the same proportion, I think, about between 16 and 20%, I'd say.
Yep. Delegate Tatum.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was just wondering, is there any coordination with the DOC and local jails that are already have a lot of opportunities for instruction?
Delegate, thank you for the question. At this point, there's not a whole lot of coordination between the two. And most of those inmates that are going to be in the local facilities are going to be the locally responsible inmates. But no, we didn't see much coordination between the two.
Yeah, Delegate Rasul.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The question is because you had mentioned security is oftentimes an issue, do we find that programs are aggregated in certain facilities where there are lower risk inmates, or how is that handled?
Delegate Rasul, good question. So there's programming at all levels of security, but the types of programming are going to vary. So you're going to have those at their highest security facilities are not going to have some of the tools that would be available maybe at the lower levels of security. But these programs are available kind of pretty broadly across DOC facilities.
Any further questions? Okay. Thank you, Drew.
Yeah, and I'll talk a little bit more about that a little bit later. All right, and I'll turn to some of our key findings on participant outcomes. We found that inmates who participated in educational programs in recent years have typically had better post-release and rearrest outcomes than those who remained on a program waitlist. In this section, I'll focus on program outcomes, and I'll discuss the waitlist issue in the next section. As slide 17 shows, participants in DOC's educational programs were more likely to be employed after release than those who were on a waitlist but who were not able to participate. For example, 49% of CTE program completers were employed in their second quarter after release, compared with 44% of those on the CTE waitlist. We also found that recent program participants had lower rearrest rates than non-participants. On this chart, the lower bars are better. As you can see, participants in each type of program were less likely to be rearrested within the first 12 months after their release than non-participants. CTE and post-secondary program completers also tended to earn higher wages than inmates on the wait list who were not able to participate. Mr. Chairman, I'll pause here in case there are any questions.
I don't see any hands up. Senator Locke.
How long is the wait list?
Good question. Senator Locke, we have some discussion on that actually in this upcoming section right here, so thank you. All right, next I'll turn to some of our findings related to unmet demand for these programs and how DOC prioritizes enrollment. We found that inmate demand for educational programs significantly exceeds DOC's capacity. As of February, there were significant wait lists for DOC's adult basic education and CTE programs. For adult basic education, the wait list of over 2,400 inmates was nearly as large as the number of inmates who were enrolled. And for the CTE wait list, it was over 3,200 inmates, which was more than double the number of inmates who were enrolled. Now, as with the prior slide, I know this is a bit difficult to read, but the chart on slide 23 is intended to help you see that the wait lists exist at most facilities, and it uses the adult basic education program as an example.
Drew, is there any effort, I'm sure there must be, to distribute incarcerated people more evenly among the facilities so maybe they could get services at a different facility? I mean, that is really funny looking.
Well, Mr. Chairman, so there's at every facility, just about every facility, there is this wait list. And so I know that they are starting to take steps to move inmates to different facilities, but as this chart shows, pretty much wherever you go, you're going to have that wait list.
Okay.
But we do have recommendations for how to better manage that wait list, which I'll talk about in just a second.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir. Senator McDougal.
as I'm looking at this, and I'm maybe should know this, but I don't, but I'm looking at like Red Onion and Wallens Ridge. Those are, some others are higher security, and they seem to be at the higher end are you seeing at the facilities, which I guess anecdotally I'm looking down, where they're lower security risk, which means the crimes that they were convicted of were less violent? It seems like those are moving faster, or the percentages are better.
Senator McDougall, good question. And that's so with those higher security facilities, there's a few constraints, and that is the first and foremost is the number of programs and the type of programs they can offer is limited. But yes, you see at those higher security facilities, there's, I think at the time there was custodial maintenance at both of them, I believe, as the primary CTE program, but this is adult basic ed. But there's various constraints that, like security staffing, security issues. There was an issue at Wallens Ridge earlier this year that kind of prevented inmates from being able to participate in classes, which can keep the wait list high. But I'm not sure if that answers your question, but we do see that there is some more constraints at those higher levels facilities.
Yep, follow up.
Mr. Chairman, I was going to ask, did y'all do any analysis of the type of crime that somebody was convicted of, like rape, murder, arson, versus some others that, like a possession or a financial crime, and whether that had any impact on access to outcomes and access?
So in terms of access, there are some crimes that may make you have to participate in other types of programs, and so may make that need to be prioritized. But in terms of whether someone can participate, it's really behavior when they're at the institution that primarily drives whether they can participate or not.
Senator McDougall. Delegate Tatum.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a little bit along those same lines, how do you prioritize, or do they prioritize the wait list? Is it first come, first serve, or is it people with shorter sentences have priority?
Delegate Tatum, that's a great question. I'll get to that in just a second, but at this point, it's primarily of those that have long enough time to complete the programs, but not so long that they're doing a trade, they're training for a trade 15 years before they're going to be using it. So it's usually around about 2 years, at least having about 2 years is where it's typically prioritized.
I'm just going to ask, Delegate Tatum, you finished? You okay? Green Rock has the most people enrolled in the lowest waiting list. What are they doing right there?
Green Rock, good question. We can look into specifically what kind of, we have information on the programs that would have been there. But it's possible that their vacancy rates may not be, I don't know, Mr. Chairman, we can get back to you on that.
All right, thanks.
Speculate.
All right, please proceed.
Okay. So despite these long wait lists, we found that DOC does not consider inmates' recidivism risk and assess educational needs when making educational program enrollment decisions, even though reducing recidivism is a primary goal of the programs. As we discussed in Chapter 5, we found that a portion of those who were enrolled in adult basic education and CTE were determined by DOC to need educational programming to reduce the risk of reoffending. However, we also found that there's a substantial portion of inmates who were enrolled who had been determined by DOC to not need educational programming to reduce their risk of reoffending. And as I mentioned, there are substantial wait lists for both groups, both programs, and many of those in the waitlisted groups were assessed to need educational programs. This is happening because, unlike with its other types of programs, DOC does not consider an inmate's educational or vocational needs in its enrollment prioritization decisions. Doing this for educational programs would better ensure that limited resources are prioritized for those who are most likely to recidivate without these programs. As the report notes, there are a considerable number of inmates who have been identified as needing educational programs to reduce their risk of reoffending, but are being released without receiving this program. Slide 27 shows our recommendation for DOC to better manage its wait list and to ensure that those who need the program the most are prioritized. Mr. Chairman, I'll pause here in case there are any questions.
Is the agency going to talk after you're finished here? Because, I mean, I'd like to know the answer to that question that you just posed.
They weren't planning to talk after this, but
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, the Director Dodson is here. If you did have questions for him, I'm sure he'd be glad to take them after the presentation.
Okay, the recommendation that you better manage the program is basically what you said.
the wait list, yes,
Wait
to
list,
prioritize inmates who have an assessed need.
Okay, very good. Delegate Rasul.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On slide 25, where you, very helpful bar where it talks about unlikely versus probable, and you've split out the enrolled. Do we have the waitlisted split out? So that way we can tell.
Yes, we do, and have that in the report.
That's okay, you don't need to find, I can go look for it. It's
We
no
do,
problem.
yeah. There's
Just
a
wanted to-
substantial portion that we didn't want to overcomplicate this graphic, but you could, I believe you could fill up that entire 70% of unlikely with people who are on the wait list who need it.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay, please continue.
All right, I'll now turn to our findings on DOC's Adult Basic Education Program. The Adult Basic Education Program is similar to adult education programs for individuals in the community who lack a high school credential. And as a bit of context, about a third of DOC inmates lack a verified high school credential. As slide 29 shows, most inmates eligible for adult basic education have elementary level reading, language arts, and math skills. Only a small proportion are at the high school level. We found that DOC's adult basic education programs are generally well designed and overseen. And we have some commentary on that in Chapter 2. One of our key findings in this area was that DOC has increased GED attainment in recent years, but the agency needs to ensure sufficient support is provided for lower level learners. For some context, to attain a GED, which is Virginia's only approved high school equivalency credential, a student needs to pass 4 GED subject tests. In recent years, DOC leadership has placed a greater emphasis on GED attainment, including by setting a statewide goal, revising testing eligibility policies, and increasing staffing and funding for GED testing. We found that this new emphasis has led to a substantial increase in the number of inmates earning a GED each year, from 117 in 2022 to 544 in 2024. This increase in GED attainment was facilitated by a substantial increase in the number of GED tests administered across DOC facilities. Importantly, however, it has also corresponded with a sharp decline in subject test pass rates, from a pass rate of 87% in early 2022 to just 52% in early 2025. This indicates that a greater proportion of students are being tested before they're ready. Chapter 2 points out that other data indicates that students are increasingly taking GED tests before they're ready, including declining pass rates for all 4 subject tests, increasing unsuccessful retakes, and declining scores among those who did pass the subject tests. Although some teachers noted some positive impacts from the GED emphasis, teachers, principals, and DOC central office staff more frequently expressed concerns about the recent emphasis on GED attainment. Concerns generally centered around students being tested before they're ready, students being retested without sufficient time for remediation, and students memorizing information to pass a test while not learning the skills needed to succeed after release. We note that a revised testing approach could ensure student readiness and promote program quality. This includes requiring a readiness assessment before taking the official GED subject tests, as was required by VDOE, the Federal Bureau of Prisons, and at least 9 other states. We have a couple of recommendations in the report to improve DOC's approach to GED testing, and they're summarized on slide 37. We also point out in Chapter 2 that DOC teachers, principals, and central office staff reported that the overemphasis on GED testing has diverted attention and resources away from lower-level learners, who comprise most students who are eligible for the adult basic education programs. DOC has been inconsistent in collecting data needed to understand the skill growth among lower-level learners. But the data that is available indicates the skill growth has declined by a small amount.
So do you attribute that to an emphasis on GED, that the other skills have declined?
Mr. Chairman, I can't say directly that does, but we have teachers telling us that they are prioritizing focusing on the GED students and less on the students.
Okay, so it's just a scientific hunch.
It's a hunch.
Yeah, it's a hunch, okay. Thanks.
The report points out that it's likely more prudent to spend resources to improve the quality of the program for lower level learners who are among the most likely to recidivate than on repeated testing. We have two recommendations to ensure that DOC is placing adequate attention on lower level learners, and they are summarized on slide 39. Mr. Chairman, I'll pause here in case there are any questions.
I don't see any. No, Delegate Carr.
Thank you. Is there a program that assesses the reading ability or lack thereof according to various lacks in the ability? Because not one size fits all for teaching reading to folks.
So, Delegate Carr, a couple of things. The assessment that they use is generally accepted as a good measure of skill growth among lower level learners. It's a better measure of the overall program effectiveness than just the GED measure. But we have some commentary in the report about that they do have curriculum and other things that you would expect to be able to tailor their programming for lower level learners. But it's just that the teachers are having to focus on this goal and taking away time and attention from students who are at the lower levels. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Carr. Anybody else? Okay. Oh, yeah, Senator Pike.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Are there programs that also do sort of inmate to inmate around sort of the GED programs? I feel like I'm like picturing like Andy Dufresne and Shawshank Redemption, like writing for Tommy, like studying for his GED, and like this report is like the 100 letters from Andy Dufresne saying like, we need these resources, we need these other things. Are there like evidence of programs where there's also inmate to inmate sort of mentoring?
Senator McPike, that's a good question. So a few things. DOC has started a new program. It's called the REAL program. It was there weren't many inmates enrolled at this point that have inmates teaching other inmates basic reading skills. It's something that's done in other states, but we were able to meet with and survey former people who are incarcerated and who have been recently released from DOC facilities. And that's something that they were saying is a lot of these educational opportunities are just between inmates and not in the classroom themselves. And so that's something we have formal or official data on, but there is that going on at the facilities.
Okay, thank you. All right. We need to step up the pace just a little bit.
All right, Mr. Chairman, I can do that. So first, in terms of CTE programs, for some background, state law requires DOC to provide inmates with opportunities to participate in CTE programs where feasible. And most DOC facilities offer at least one CTE program, but the courses offered at each facility vary. We found that DOC's CTE programs are generally well designed and overseen, but that their effectiveness is undermined by a lack of connection with employers prior to release and frequent facility transfers by DOC. Mr. Chairman, this slide just summarizes why we determine that DOC's CTE programs are generally well designed and overseen. We did find, however, that DOC needs a formal process to connect inmates who complete CTE programs with relevant job opportunities. As I mentioned earlier, CTE programs have had higher employment rates than non-participants. Still, almost half were not employed in the first full quarter after release. We have a recommendation in the report for the creation of several new positions specifically to help connect the CTE program completers with job opportunities in the field in which they were trained before their release. We also found that greater attention by DOC to its facility transfer practices would increase the impact of CTE programs and the state funds that are used to support them. Only about half of CTE participants completed their program in the past couple years, and facility transfers by DOC were the second most common reason for non-completion.
Okay. So you're saying that they're going through a program, they're learning things, and then they get transferred to another prison that doesn't have the same resources.
Mr. Chairman, that's correct, and we actually looked at the proportion of inmates that were able to then resume it at the new facility, and it's rare. It's about 7%.
So, I mean, isn't this a problem that could be solved? I mean, it's just, it doesn't sound like rocket science to maybe keep somebody till they're finished with their program.
Mr. Chairman, yes, we agree, and that is, we have a recommendation.
Okay, thank you.
We do acknowledge that transfers may be necessary for a variety of reasons, but DOC should ensure that its transfer practices adequately consider an inmate's CTE participation. And here's the recommendation for that. Mr. Chairman, I'll pause here in case there are any questions.
All right. Delegate Ware.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And following up really on your question and the reply, it seems like we could get helpful information from the department if they're here to speak to that, maybe after the presentation. I know we're sort of asking on the fly, but there may be some clarifying that would be helpful in that regard. Thank you.
Okay, please continue.
I'll now briefly summarize some of our key findings related to post-secondary programs at DOC facilities. As of September, post-secondary programs were offered at about half of DOC's 37 major correctional facilities. Most of these programs are new and were prompted by the recent restoration of Pell Grant eligibility for inmates. These programs are typically taught on-site by an instructor employed by a Virginia higher education institution, and DOC provides space, administrative, and security staffing support for them. As you may recall, the 2025 General Assembly passed legislation that would have significantly expanded educational programs, including post-secondary programs in state prisons. That bill was vetoed by the governor in anticipation of this study. As the report notes, providing consistent post-secondary programming across all DOC facilities has some advantages, but would likely be challenging, especially in the near term, for several reasons, including those that I'll cover in the next section. In the meantime, however, we found that several administrative changes at DOC would improve the operation of post-secondary programs at DOC facilities. These changes would also help support the future expansion of programs. The report details several administrative challenges that will hinder post-secondary program implementation and expansion if they're not addressed. These include frequent administrative delays from DOC central office, a lack of operational policies and procedures specifically for post-secondary programs, and a reliance on DOC educational staff to volunteer for administrative or security responsibilities to ensure post-secondary programs are able to operate. The report includes several recommendations for DOC that will help support the implementation and the expansion of post-secondary programs at DOC facilities. These recommendations are summarized on slide 51. Mr. Chairman, I know ran through that pretty quickly, but if you have any questions at this point?
I don't see any.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, and I'll turn to some of our findings on the opportunities to support program effectiveness, access and effectiveness. We found that several operational changes at DOC would improve educational programming access and efficiency. In recent years, there's been an interest among both the General Assembly and the governor in expanding inmates' access to educational programs. We surveyed wardens and principals to understand the extent to which certain factors are currently a constraint to expanding educational programming at their facilities. The most commonly cited constraints across facilities were the availability and adequacy of IT infrastructure, shortages of security staffing, and a lack of suitable physical space. While additional funding may be needed to address some of these constraints and meet a significant proportion of unmet demand for educational programs, we note in Chapter 5 that some unmet demand can be met through operational efficiencies rather than solely new spending. One key problem that is compromising the effectiveness and efficiency of DOC's educational programs is the lack of effective maintenance of classroom technology. We note in the report that only 38% of surveyed principals and teachers agreed that IT support is provided in a timely manner. And only 42% agreed that student use computers function reliably most of the time. In the report, we suggest possible reasons for these issues and recommend DOC take appropriate steps to address them. We also found that DOC could likely do more to improve the timeliness of hiring teachers to fill vacant positions. As of May 2025, facility educational positions had been vacant for a median of 249 days. The reasons for these lengthy vacancies are unclear and likely vary, but wardens and principals reported that delays in DOC's hiring process, uncompetitive compensation, and perceptions about working in a prison were key reasons for the hiring challenges. DOC has also held a portion of its educational positions vacant since the Department of Correctional Education was transferred to DOC in 2012. The agency reports that this is due to insufficient personnel funding and estimates that it would need an additional $4.3 million to fully fund all educational positions.
Okay, Drew, could you explain that a little bit more? It's holding $4.3 million because it doesn't have enough to fully fund whatever the objective is.
So they are not filling, at this most recent years, 12% of positions because of reported insufficient personnel funding that came along with when Department of Correctional Education was transferred to DOC. So basically, if they were to fill all those positions, they wouldn't be able to afford them, is what they're saying.
And so that results in $4.3 million in the bank that they can't spend.
Mr. Chairman, they would need $4.3 million to fill those positions,
okay.
Educational positions.
Okay.
One more thing on this slide, the report notes that filling all vacant teaching positions would not fully eliminate program wait lists, but it would increase the number of inmates who could participate in educational programs.
Senator McDougall.
Did y'all do any analysis whether those teachers could be virtual or they had to be in person?
Senator McDougall, good question. At this point, they couldn't be virtual because there's no internet access in the classrooms, I guess, and they don't have the capabilities in the housing units to facilitate a virtual instruction. But that could be in the future when the IT infrastructure gets to a point where they could facilitate that. That could be an opportunity in the future.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
If the IT infrastructure was in place, it would be significantly less expensive, I would think, than that number to staff all those facilities. Is that accurate?
Senator McDougall, to the extent, there's other states that have done that approach. And in terms of how much that would cost in total, I don't really know, but definitely it seems like it could be, you wouldn't need the space, for example. You wouldn't need a full-time instructor there at the time. So I could see that being a reasonable conclusion.
Follow up?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. So I'll follow up on that. Has there been a budget request made to have internet access provided in some of the facilities? And has it not made it through the budget process?
Mr. Chairman, that's a good question. I don't think there has been specifically for this area.
All right, thank you.
We also found that taking steps to reduce avoidable security-related disruptions to classes would also help improve inmates' ability to attend and complete educational programs. As I mentioned, educational programs are highly reliant on the cooperation and support of security staff. The report notes that educational programs at some facilities experience regular security-related disruptions, such as lockdowns and delays in getting students to their classes. Although some security-related disruptions are to be expected, DOC policy requires that wardens minimize the cancellation of educational programs to the extent possible. There are some indications that at least some wardens may not be fully meeting this expectation, and we provide a recommendation to help address this issue. And slide 58 summarizes some of our recommendations we propose to address the problems that I just covered. But before leaving this slide, I should also mention that we have 2 sections in Chapter 5 that address 2 other important constraints I mentioned, which is security staffing and space constraints. And one thing I'd like to mention is that the recent General Assembly funding for mobile trailers, mobile educational trailers for the CTE program should help increase student access to those programs. We also note that that is an approach that is a cost-effective strategy moving forward to help increase student access. Mr. Chairman, I'll pause here in case there are any questions.
I don't see any hands, so let's get.
All right. In this last section, I'll briefly cover some of our findings on educational programs in local and regional jails. And if you're interested in this topic, we've got more information in Appendix D. And for a bit of context, Virginia's local and regional jails house both pre- and post-trial inmates. And the statewide average daily jail population in February was 20,651. Of this population, about half were awaiting trial, and the other half were awaiting sentencing or serving all or a portion of their sentence. Jails also house some state-responsible inmates, and they tend to have much shorter stays than state-responsible inmates who are ultimately transferred to DSC facility. We found that most jails provide some educational programs, but that shorter incarcerations make expansion less cost-effective than at DOC facilities. Most jails reported offering some educational programs for inmates, even though they're not required to by law. For example, almost all reported offering some form of adult education to inmates, commonly provided through partnerships with local adult education providers. Just over half reported offering CTE programs, and most of these were shorter programs than you would find at a DOC facility. Fewer jails reported offering post-secondary programs. In interviews and survey responses, jail superintendents, sheriffs, and other staff reported generally being able to meet demand for adult education programs, but not CTE and post-secondary programs. The most common barriers to meeting demand were limited funding, physical space, and instructional staff. As we detail in the report, several other constraints make comprehensive educational programs less feasible in jails than in prisons, especially the relatively short stays. For context, the median expected completion time for a CTE program at a DOC facility is 12 months, which is 6 times longer than the average length of stay for post-trial jail inmates. Jail officials also indicated that many of their inmates have higher priority needs like mental health or substance abuse treatment, which make active participation in educational programs difficult, if not met first. Still, we provide some guidance in the report on approaches that could be considered if there's a desire to expand educational programs in jail. For example, using self-guided tablet-based educational programs is an approach used by at least 11 jails. And these do not require additional space or instructors at the facility.
Did the sheriffs get the money from us or from their locality to do that?
So there's no dedicated funding for educational programs
in jail, so the sheriffs found the money somewhere from their locality.
They're working with their partners in the community. So for the adult education programs, may be funded by through VDOE, but providing some instruction in jail. Prioritizing shorter-term CTE programs, such as an OSHA 10 certification, can make it more likely that inmates are able to complete the CTE program than if only longer-term, more comprehensive programs are offered. And lastly, the report notes that given the relatively short inmate stays, it makes sense for jails to prioritize adult basic education and CTE programs over post-secondary academic programs, which take more time to complete. Mr. Chairman, that completes my prepared remarks, but happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Very informative. Delegate Wilt.
Thank you. So all the way back to the beginning of your presentation, I wanted to hear the presentation before I ask the question. In slide number 4, dear comment, recent participants, and the outcomes shortly after release, the can you put that in perspective? What shortly? Why is that? What does that mean?
Delegate Wilk,
I know
good
what
question.
it means, but in context of the report.
Yeah, so one thing I committed to you all during the work plan is to work as hard as we could to get as up-to-date information as we could. And this reflects, we only were able to get really rearrest data, 12-month rearrest data for recent participants. I will say that our findings, that national research and previous reports that have been done by DOC that have longer time horizons, like with reincarcerations and reconvictions, those have showed similar patterns. And so we got as recent data as we could, but because we couldn't say the longer time horizon what's happening with these people, but we were able to say that.
You follow, Dr. Wilt? Okay. Well, it doesn't look like there's any more questions. Good job. Yeah.
Wants
Senator
to
Evans.
take one? Is Director Dotson here? Yeah, if you could come forward. I had a question about the materials for the electrical and the plumbing training. I went to Buckingham Correctional Facility, I guess it was last year, and I asked the instructor, and they said they hadn't gotten increases in the facilities budget for construction materials in the last 5 or 10 years, or at least 5 years. Is that something that's under consideration? And is it needed?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Evans, absolutely it's needed. I mean, we would, again, we really appreciated this process because nothing here surprises us, and we know that what we're talking about here delivers public safety across the Commonwealth. It just does. And so we would love to expand our welding, our all like electrical everywhere. It's just we have physical plant problems that would require some money.
But the materials for particularly for electrical and plumbing, is that put a damper on how many people you can train, or is it just something you're working with?
Oh, certainly. It reduces the number that we can train. So it's a win-win for everyone if we can expand that, I guess.
Okay, and final follow-up, Mr. Chair.
Senator Evans.
Is that a separate line item? If we were to allocate money in the budget for that, would that just go into the big corrections budget, or would it go specifically to that purpose?
Well, if that's the purpose that this body delineates it for, then that's where it'll go.
Thank you. Yes. Thanks for your work on this.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Yep. Would you like to respond to any of the other tweaks and suggestions that the staff made for your program? You know, spreading the. How about the issue of moving an inmate when they need to stay to finish their course?
So, yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I do want to recognize that our Deputy Director for Programs, Education, and Reentry, Scott Richardson, is here with us, and our Superintendent for Education, Dr. Rodney Berry. We take this very seriously at the Department of Corrections. And again, the reason we do is because every recidivism point we can drop, that's one fewer victim. That's one more father or mother raising their child. So it's a win-win for everyone. It's public safety. And it's providing real opportunities for second chances. So with respect, it is an issue in terms of transfers, and people are transferred for any number of reasons. You know, sometimes they're behaving well and doing well, and they are able to go to a lower level, and they want to go somewhere closer to their family. They've asked for a transfer. Sometimes they're not behaving, and we have to send them to a higher security facility. There's a number of reasons. Our current offender management system that we use does not really give us the ability to track it like we need to track it to try to minimize transfers when it's preventing someone from completing an educational program. There is a software solution that's out there. We've been in conversation with the Department of Planning and Budget. 3 other states use this offender management system to help specifically for education program. Pennsylvania, Georgia, and Texas are all using it very successfully, and so that we have started discussions about that because we agree that's one of our biggest. The more people we can touch with our educational programs, all the data shows it works. So that's been our goal, is to increase the numbers, and that's one way we can administratively, I think, do better.
Are you asking for some technology improvements just to have basic internet so we can do some remote learning?
Absolutely. We've already begun sort of a process. It's slow because we don't really have dedicated funding, but to increase our broadband access in all of our facilities, and we're sort of part of the way through that process. In the coming months here, we're finally going to get new tablets for the inmate population. And we're hopeful that these tablets, with the new contract, we're going to be able to deliver some of the distance learning and things like that 2 inmates in the housing units rather than having to have them come. That'll expand our ability, especially to deliver post-secondary education, which we're really excited about our partnerships with the community colleges to do that. So, but it's going to require some investment in infrastructure.
One final question for me. Are you doing anything with local and regional jails? I know they have a different population. It's a little harder. The inmates aren't there as long. But it seems to me that we need to do, you're doing a lot of work. If you could share with them if they have shorter term programs or something we could do to help the jail population.
Well, we're certainly willing to engage in that conversation, absolutely. The only thing, we're not really working with the jails particularly. The only thing we do is occasionally, if there's someone that's a state responsible but is still in a local regional jail, but there's a belief they need some kind of, usually substance abuse programming is what it comes down to. We try to bring them in if we can and get them that, but we don't have any kind of a formal agreement with the jails.
Well, I would request that you kind of talk to the Sheriff's Association and see what we can do to maybe, I know it's a harder subject, but there should be some programs that would be applicable in both places that you've got now and that folks have access to that the jails don't. So
we have a good relationship with the sheriffs because we're constantly moving inmates back and forth, and so it's easy for us to begin that conversation.
Thank you very much. Anybody else? Yeah, Delegate Rasul and then Delegate Ware.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Two questions. The rub between, so having a 4-fold increase in your GED rate, I think that's great over this period of time. But the rub that was mentioned between the kind of lower passing rate, and I guess there's going to be some give there, right? I mean, if you're going to have some more folks graduate, but if you want to comment on that rub and the insinuation that maybe a little bit of overemphasis there. And then second, the lack of connection from the CTE graduates to the employers. Any thoughts on that?
Certainly. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Delegate. So there's a little bit of, I don't know if disagreement's the right word, but some debate internally about where the right line is on, I mean, we've sort of blown it out of the water in terms of GEDs the last 2 years, more than we've ever had in individual years, which means the pass rate's going to come down probably because we're testing more. I mean, that's just the way it is. Are we testing too much when people aren't ready? There's some fine line that we're trying to figure out where it is. I think it's what was identified by the study is fair, and we're having those debates right now about whether we need to, how do we focus our limited time and resources on what's going to deliver the best results for the most people. The other question was, yes. So we've had great success we got a grant funding for a business developer position and saw great success with being able to connect. That's absolutely something we can do. And one of the first questions I asked when I walked through the door was, do we know what the top 10, 15 industries are that are hiring in Virginia? Let's train for those positions because we have a population that needs jobs. And so we only have the one position right now that's been successful over the last year. So we piloted it over the last year. It's been very successful in connecting with, not just connecting people with jobs, but also making contacts with the business community so that we have continuing. Because what we find are very often when someone hires, a second chance hire that hires one of our individuals, that individual is very loyal. They work hard. They respect the opportunity that they've been given. And that we have those employers coming back to us saying, hey, we have more vacancies. So we can do better. There's no question. I think the study shows that.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, just to follow up on that.
Okay.
So the Pappas Coalition and Virginia Cares, those organizations, I mean, utilizing them as a conduit to the employers, can that happen, or can we do more there and letting them do some of the footwork for you?
I'd say that we can always do better with engaging with outside groups that generally want to help. We've tried to do that in this space, but I think that's a great idea.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Dotson, for your surprise visit here today, too. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, Mr.
Thanks
Chairman.
for cooperating with the staff. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay. Moving right along, Kimberly has the next. Oh, Justin. Okay. So I have my notes here. Justin Brown will introduce himself.
But now you just introduced me, so I don't need to do it. We're already
We all
saving
know who
time
you
here,
are.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
It's good. Okay, so just as a reminder, last November you directed us to review Virginia's historical and projected demographics. And just a quick note, this is a little different from our typical studies. This is just for your informational purposes. This may raise more questions than it answers, but we don't make any recommendations in here. This is just for your information. Also say that we were fortunate to be able to partner with Weldon Cooper on this project. Specifically, we had access to Mr. Hamilton Lombard, the state's demographer, who's with us here today and may give us an assist on certain questions. And we primarily used U.S. Census data and Weldon Cooper data for this work. We also did a few high-level interviews with some agencies about potential impacts. And our research methodologist, Sarah Smith, played a key role in this project and will also be presenting some of the information to you this morning. So in terms of the big picture, long-term, we found that Virginia's population grew a little bit more than the national average since 1990. But as I think everybody would expect, that growth didn't occur evenly across regions. Far southwest and south side lost population during that same time period. The birth rate has been declining in Virginia and nationally, and what that means for Virginia is that the population growth is more dependent on either international immigration or domestic migration from other states. And the long-term trend of Virginia's population getting older is also continuing. The projection is that by 2040, Virginia could have more than 600,000 people over the age of 80. So let me just give some real brief background on how demographic data works. And I will say, I'm going to try to catch us up some time here. I'm going to skip some slide numbers, so you've got more in your packet than what I'm going to go over here today, but please ask questions or stop me if you'd like to. So definitionally, demographics is really just the statistical characteristics of a given population. There's other data out there, for example, economic data and jobs data, and that's not what we're really talking about. But demographics can obviously be affected by a whole host of non-demographic factors, such as national policy decisions or changes in economic conditions. And I did just want to acknowledge some of the recent or ongoing federal policy changes that aren't showing up in demographic data yet, but very well may starting next year. These would include the reductions and shifts in federal spending, especially in Northern Virginia. It would also include changing international immigration policy, particularly in terms of enforcement. Now, these probably will affect the population statistics, but we just won't know from a demographic perspective until next year after the 2025 data gets released. So from a demographic perspective, there are really three components that make up kind of the total population trends. This slide just defines them. There's natural population, international immigration, and domestic migration. And we'll talk about each of these as we go through. So if there's no questions on that background, let me just look at the very big picture in terms of historical population trends. I alluded to this at the outset, but since 1990, Virginia's population has grown 42%. And as I said, this growth was slightly higher than the national average. Now let's focus kind of regionally in terms of other states. You can see Virginia over the long term has been kind of middle of the pack in terms of population growth. This shows the long-term growth and growth within the last 5 years. And you can see, for example, over the long term, Georgia and North Carolina grew quite a bit more than Virginia did. Locally, population increased in the majority of Virginia localities, but there were actually 31 that did lose some population since 1990. Now in Virginia, rural population did decline the most, but I would note that Virginia's rural localities didn't lose as much population as the typical rural locality nationwide. This shows population growth by Go Virginia region since 1990. And you can see that over that time period, the Fredericksburg Bay region grew the most, followed by Northern Virginia. And you can see far southwest lost population and south side lost just a little bit. Here's the same map, just focused on the last 5 years. Story is pretty similar, just all the percentages are lower. And I did want to bring to your attention something that Weldon Cooper did. They did some analysis looking at the aging population, but more specifically about people over the age of 60 who met other certain conditions. And this just shows that the percentage of people in each region who were over 60 and, for example, were living alone, were disabled, or living in poverty. You can see South Side and Southwest are generally near the top for each of those three categories, and we'll pick back up on some of the implications of that at the end. The last thing I'll say before I turn it over to our methodologist, Sarah Smith, is that just want to talk about the components of total population change over the long term. And this slide just shows how those three components relate to each other since 1990. For us, there's two things that jumped out. First, you can see that for quite a few years until last year, domestic migration was negative, meaning that more people left the state than moved into the state. Domestic migration are the lighter blue bars. Second, you can see that the last few years, international immigration was by far the biggest driver of any population growth, and international immigration is the darker blue bars there. So if it's okay with you, Mr. Chairman, I'll ask Ms. Smith to talk about some of the components of population.
All right, good morning. It's great to be with you all today. So Justin previewed the components of population change. And now we're going to take a closer look at each of those, starting with natural population change. When we talk about natural population change, we're often referring to the balance between births and deaths in a given year. Net natural population change can be described as positive when births exceed deaths. As we saw in the previous slide, or in a previous slide, the share of population growth attributable to natural change is declining. In the last 35 years, the number of births peaked in 2007 at roughly 109,000, but have declined somewhat since then. Last year, there were 94,000 births. Meanwhile, the number of deaths each year has climbed at a greater rate, even ignoring the peak of 86,000 during the pandemic. Roughly 78,000 people died in 2024 compared to 46,000 in 1990. So this graph shows the ratio of births to deaths and allows us to compare jurisdictions. Values greater than 1 are indicating more births than deaths. For example, nationally, there were 2 births for every death in 1990. Virginia's ratio of births to deaths has broadly tracked national trends over time. We see some ebbs and flows from year to year, but we're on a steady march towards parity between births and deaths on an annual basis. In 1990, there were nearly 2.2 births for every death in Virginia. Last year, we only had 1.2 births for every death. These trends over time are mirrored in our comparison states as well. Several of our neighbors, such as West Virginia, have reached ratios below 1, indicating deaths are exceeding births, and we cover those in greater detail in your packet. I'll pause here if there are any questions about that section before we move on.
I don't see any, thank you.
Great. All right, so now we'll talk about international migration. So international migration is complex. It includes both citizens that may be moving between other countries in the United States and also non-citizens that have moved to Virginia from other countries. We examine trends over time and the characteristics of our immigrant communities today. For the latter, we're including both naturalized citizens and non-citizens. The U.S. Census, our main data source for this section, makes every effort to include everyone by using multiple data sources. But the numbers here that we're presenting are likely an undercount for the non-citizen group. So it's important to keep that in mind when interpreting them. So compared to births and deaths, the number of international movers is quite dynamic over time. However, we do see a general upward trend from the mid-2000s to the mid-2010s, followed by a brief dip and then a sudden increase. The last 2 years are the highest we've seen in at least 35 years. In 2024, we added an additional 56,000 people via international migration to our population. Given these trends, it follows that the share of the population that are immigrants has also risen over time. In the 1990 census, 5% of the population were immigrants, and today more than 1 million Virginia residents are immigrants, comprising 13% of the total population. Keep in mind that these are likely conservative estimates, particularly for the non-citizen population. Among our comparison states, Virginia also stands out. We have one of the largest immigrant communities as a share of population, second only to Maryland. Immigrants in Virginia are also more highly educated and have more economic resources than in our comparison states, according to our analysis. 4 in 10 adults have at least a bachelor's degree, and a little more than a quarter are at or below 200% FPL. Regionally, the immigrant population is most concentrated in Northern Virginia, where 28% of the population are either naturalized citizens or residents from other countries. The more rural parts of the state have the smallest shares. Only 1% of the far southwest region are immigrants. Do we have any questions about international migration?
I'm just curious.
Delicate hearing.
And it's small. I was just curious with naturalized citizens, or especially, well, a lot of Virginia, individuals or parents who are in foreign service or in the military, but they are naturalized.
Okay.
And on return to the country. So I was just curious if there was any breakout.
So looking at military participation in that crosstab with immigration status.
Right.
I think we may have looked at that, but I'll have to get back to you.
I was just curious, yeah,
That's a great question.
There was a lot of people, including me, that were not born here.
Right.
But
Wonderful.
my parents were in service. So
Okay,
thank you.
So no, we do have that data, and that is something that the ACS, which is one of the main sources for this section, the American Community Survey, they do ask a battery of questions that would allow us to answer that. So we can get back to you on that. Of course. Other questions? Okay, great. All right, so next we'll be talking about domestic migration, which refers to the state-to-state flows of people. The U.S. Census uses a number of data sources to construct their estimates, including the American Community Survey and administrative data from the IRS, Medicare, and Social Security. And like the other components, domestic migration is on net, meaning we subtract the outflows from the inflows. If the count's negative, it means that we're losing people to other states. To give a sense of magnitude, there are roughly 500,000 people that are moving in and out annually. Prior to 2014, domestic migration was generally positive, peaking in the early 2000s. More people were moving into Virginia than moving out each year. This trend reversed in 2014. More people have left Virginia for other states than have moved in for a decade. So to put these numbers in context, we added roughly 27,000 people each year during the same period via natural population change. Without international migration, Virginia's population would have shrunk in 2022 due to domestic migration and the balance of births and deaths. In 2024, domestic migration flipped back to being positive, but only by 5,000 people. It's uncertain if we'll sustain these changes into the future. We also analyzed the most common states that new residents are coming from and the destinations of Virginians leaving the state. The most common origin and destination states include a mix of our neighboring states and then also larger states such as California and Florida. And there's more information about the characteristics of domestic migrants in your packet if you have an interest. All right, so then this graphic aggregates domestic migration over different time periods, so it's adding up all the people that have moved in and out of the states. The losses over the last 10 years have not been large enough to erase the longer-term gains via domestic migration, which we can see on that left-hand panel. However, many of our neighbors have experienced net positive migration in both the long and the short term. And we'll switch gears to talk about the forecast in the future, unless there are some questions about this section.
Questions? I don't see any hands. Thank you.
Great. All right, so now we'll talk about projections. So the Weldon Cooper Center released their population projections this summer. We asked them to put together an alternative forecast, assuming lower levels of immigration. We'll briefly touch on their official projections today, but you can find the alternative lower immigration scenario in your packet. Just a reminder that none of these projections factor in recent federal policy changes. So according to Weldon Cooper's forecast, Virginia's population is expected to exceed 9 million by the year 2030 and continue growing through 2040. And in the longer term, the forecast is predicting similar regional trends to what we've seen historically, which you can see here in this slide. And the composition of Virginia's population is also expected to shift over time. The share of the population that's of traditional working age is projected to decline from 59% to 56% by 2040. And by 2040, people over the age of 80 will make up about 7% of the total population. This translates to more than 600,000 people, about half of which would be over the age of 85. Justin will then talk about some of the potential policy impacts here in this last section, but in the meantime, are there any other questions about the forecast?
Thank you very much.
Great.
Okay.
So just to close this out, Mr. Chairman, I want to just hit on some of the really high-level potential policy implications of how this may play out. Talk a little bit about the impact of declining birth rates. So the biggest impact is that without immigration or domestic migration to make up the difference, the population just mathematically will decline. Now, this has a lot of implications for the economy and bigger picture structural things that aren't just about state government. But in terms of state government, declining birth rates can in fact reduce demand for things like childcare, K-12, or four-year higher education, which we've kind of talked about with you over the last few years. And this could be viewed positively for the state budget, at least from a spending perspective. There's a lot of evidence that government's ability to affect declining birth rates is pretty limited. Japan is probably the most widely cited example where many things have been tried, but the birth rate has not gone up. So it's a tough thing for government to kind of materially affect. So in terms of the aging of the population, and this has been a very long-term trend, research generally shows that as that happens, you get a slowing economy. But that slower economic growth could be mitigated because people may choose or have to work later in life. It's also possible that technological innovation could still allow productivity to go up, even if there's not as many people in the workforce. And we had a conversation with Virginia Tax, and they also noted that you might have less income and fewer assets subject to taxation. And those two bottom sub-bullets there are examples of how that could play out, for example, in terms of Social Security income being exempt from state income taxes. So certainly a big ongoing and future impact of the aging population on the healthcare industry. I think this is fairly common knowledge, but this could include even bigger workforce shortages than you have now in the healthcare industry, greater need for different types of long-term care, and higher Medicaid spending. So we talked with DARS about this trend of older people increasingly living alone, being disabled, or living in poverty, and they pointed out this would increase the need for in-home care services. Weldon Cooper has also pointed out that this risks people being more socially isolated and having mental health issues. The sub-bullets at the bottom are some examples of programs that could see higher demand because of this trend in the future. The other side of the aging population is potential workforce shortages. In this case, because there are relatively fewer people of working age. A lot of factors could affect how this plays out, though. But Virginia Tax noted that you could have a lower proportion of the total tax base subject to payroll withholding, and that could it could reduce the certainty of revenue forecasting moving forward. It's also been said that you could see a decline in consumption. Working age adults and their families are a huge driver of spending in the economy. And as you have relatively fewer young and working age adults, that reduced household spending could show up in slower growing or lower sales tax revenue. And that would obviously affect local and state governments. So the last item I would highlight here, this gets fairly conceptual, but it's this heavier reliance on migration or international migration as a driver of population growth. We talked to VEDP, and they pointed out that particularly in regions that have already kind of seen contraction, could actually force more competition kind of within and among those regions, and competition kind of among more localities in different parts of the state for people and businesses to come here. So VEDP made the point that it potentially makes it more important to try to recruit out-of-state students here for higher education and find some way to get them to stay here in Virginia after they graduate. They pointed out, I think there's a pilot program going on with the Virginia Talent Opportunity Partnership to try to do a little bit of that. So that is all we had, Mr. Chairman. Happy to take additional questions should you have them.
Yeah, Delegate Tato looks like she has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just curious. I know you weren't looking at this, but I wonder if it came up. And I know in Virginia Beach, I work closely with some senior organizations, and especially, that more are living alone and isolated. A lot of them want to work, but because of the benefits cliff, their hands are a little tied. Did you look at, if we could figure out a way to get them working, it would be a wonderful.
Delegate, that's an interesting point. I don't want to put Mr. Lombard on the hook, but I'm assuming there's conversations about kind of older people wanting to work, but maybe in this case fearing that it wouldn't be worth it financially for them to do that.
And disabled. They're autistic.
Correct.
We have a big autistic
Yeah.
population that want to work, but they have to work so many hours, they're going to lose their benefits. Their benefits are affected. So it's going to skew the numbers, but it's kind of unfortunate that we can't find, I mean, because working, a lot of people want to work, and it makes them feel good, and they have healthier mental health.
I think it's a fair point. It didn't come up in our discussions, but I think that's a very fair
Something
point.
to look at, maybe.
Yeah. Do you have anything else to say? I mean, is there any date? There's no data about that, really, is there, in terms of people wanting to work but can't?
Well, I think there is a lot of data collected where you could calculate this. You can look at the income level by age. You can look at if they report a disability, whether they're working or not. And there could be that one of the Virginia departments has looked at this already. But I think that the overall point that there is going to be increased need for that is a good one. And there is some good data to sort of put some numbers on that.
Okay, anybody else? Okay, very good, thank you.
Thank you. I think Ms.
that's
Sarte
very-
is going to come up next.
Very
Mr.
good
Chairman.
now. I mean, one of our studies we just approved this morning at the subcommittee directly addresses this in part anyway. Well, Kimberly, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning.
Good morning. And you're going to introduce our study managers here.
I am. I'm Kimberly Sarta. I'm one of JLARC's associate directors, and the rest of today's meeting is dedicated to some of JLARC's oversight activities. This will include JLARC's oversight of VITA, our annual state spending report, and our annual report on the state's economic development incentives. We will start with VITA. The Appropriation Act gives JLARC ongoing oversight of VITA. And as we mentioned to you last month, we want to give you an update specifically on VITA's oversight of AI, as this is obviously a very dynamic topic. And I did want to emphasize that this is a very high-level update on VITA's oversight of AI. Obviously, it looks like the Commission is going to be directing a broader study in this area, and we will get into these issues in a lot more detail. So Alex Jansen, who is JLARC's oversight analyst, will be giving you the update on VITA. And following Alex, Bob Osmond, VITA's Chief Information Officer, will be giving you his annual update on VITA, and that will include AI, but also other important things that are going on at VITA. Alex?
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the Commission. Thank you for your eagerness to get me up here this morning.
Well, and we want you to eagerly present in a
Excellent.
rapid fashion, if possible. The agency that everybody loves so much.
As you say, talking fast is not a problem. I will move us forward. Thank you. Mr. Chair, I will now go through, as Kimberly said, our high-level overview for the Virginia Information Technologies Agency, or VITA. I do want to start by saying thank you to the staff who helped me on this. So Sam Leisman, Senior Legislative Analyst, was instrumental. So a big thank you to Sam and to Kimberly as well. This slide just shows our ongoing oversight authority. As a quick refresher, VITA provides the infrastructure services for 65 executive branch agencies across a variety of areas. VITA is also responsible for oversight of security, project management, procurement, and strategic planning for agency IT. For this presentation, we did a high-level review of artificial intelligence oversight by VITA. So we talked to VITA about their resources and guidance. We talked to 4 agencies about some projects and use cases that they're working on and some feedback, and reviewed VITA documentation. So I want to start by saying that this is a relatively new area for VITA to have oversight in, only starting in the past couple years. So over the next few slides, I will go through what VITA has done, some of those agency initiatives, feedback, about AI guidance, how VITA compares to other states, and I will also highlight a few things that VITA is working on to continue to improve their guidance and oversight. So Executive Order 30 required VITA to establish security standards around AI, and so VITA published the Artificial Intelligence Standard in late 2023 and held an information session in May of 2024 for agencies to understand what the requirements for AI projects would be. VITA is using several guiding principles for AI use. You can see them on the screen. I won't read them all, but a few I just want to call out are improving service delivery and accessibility, maintaining data security, and ensuring transparency. And feel free to stop me at any time if you have questions. Otherwise, I'll roll through.
I'm not going to ask any questions, I promise.
Thank you. VITA is also responsible to develop a review and approval process for AI use cases. A use case is a specific instance where AI may be used by agencies. It's a smaller unit than a project, so one project may have many use cases. VITA created the AI registry, which routes use cases involving AI through the mandatory approval process they created. Agencies must submit their potential use cases, and they're approved based on the criteria that are in the standard that exists. There are a few exceptions, so use cases do not require approval. They're exempt if they are only for internal use, don't use any personal data, and are only used in a development phase. So there's a couple of those in there. Okay, so how does VITA compare to other states? VITA is largely in line with other states, which is great. As we just talked about, they have their policy standard, their security standards, and an AI registry, similar to the majority of other states. There are some additional resources available in our peer states that also centralize their IT services that we did want to highlight. So first, they are taking the step to centralize AI oversight information in one division or office of their IT agency, and I'll come back to that in a couple slides. They're also creating sandboxes or secure testing environments for agencies to come work and develop and practice in their AI projects. So for example, in Georgia, there's a physical space, an innovation lab, at their IT authority where other agency staff can come and work with the Georgia authority staff to further develop their IT projects involving AI. So there has been some wider rollout so far for AI tools in Virginia. I will mention two. So the first is SmartLing, which is an AI translation tool, and it will translate agency websites into one of 11 different languages, depending on the user's need. And additionally, Copilot Chat, which is an AI assistant similar to ChatGPT, has been made available to executive branch agency staff. I do want to note, I highlight to ensure security that Copilot Chat does not connect or embed into the user's files, and also none of the information that the user puts into that Copilot Chat is used to train the wider Microsoft AI model. And these are in use at almost every agency now. So how are agencies moving forward? So agencies have begun to explore AI use cases, and there are a growing number on VITA's AI registry. They provided us with a copy as of October 31st. There were 182 entries on there. While VITA has approved over 90 use cases, the exact number is a little inconsistent, and this ties back to the registry uses two separate systems, one for the official record and one for approval, and I will talk about that on the next slide. Some examples of use cases that have been approved and are moving forward include the Racing Commission wants to use a transcription tool to transcribe their meetings starting later this year, they hope. DOC has several initiatives to improve facility monitoring and security, and VITA themselves is developing a chatbot to help users find information easier on their website and hope to make this available to all agencies. So there are some challenges with the registry and understanding the number of use cases. The registry is not updated regularly, and this ties back to those two systems. So there's one system for the official record where the use case is entered, and then it is moved over manually into the approval workflow. Once it's approved, it has to be manually updated back in the official record. So for example, in the most recent registry that we saw, there were 4 that were listed in the official record system as draft, but listed as approved in the approval system. So additionally, agencies shared that they are not entirely clear on which types of use cases to include, and there are some agencies that do not report use cases or projects, at least initially. So VITA is aware of these areas and is also working to improve additional facets of their guidance and oversight. So there are some additional pieces I will mention here. So of the multiple resources available for their guidance and support, some of them are out of date or don't meet agency needs. So a community of practice around AI was developed, and we heard from one agency that it was more of a vendor fare than a pure learning opportunity. As discussed on the two previous slides, the AI system using two different systems is sometimes challenging for keeping things up to date, and agencies would like additional clarity on what use cases or products require entry onto the registry. Even after use case approval, there is some frustration from agencies about being able to move forward. One agency mentioned to us that they lack the necessary platform to move forward with their project. They worked up the AI project to be based on a cloud platform that they did not currently have access to. One theme that emerged through all of these conversations is that VITA does not have one singular voice around AI for agencies. So we heard that different teams within VITA may have different answers to the same question, depending on when they were asked. VITA is aware of this and is working to establish a role to be able to serve as that centralized AI information role, which will also bring them in line with our peer states. I also want to highlight that VITA is aware of the issues and concerns around the guidance and the systems, and so is working to streamline that approval process and also provide additional clarity to agencies for what requires registration. We also wanted to share with the Commission, while I did not do a deep dive on any of these, there is a lot of work being done on AI outside of VITA within Virginia. So up on the slides, and in the interest of time, I won't read them all, but there were additional initiatives directed by Executive Order 30 to develop standards and oversight. On the legislative side of the House, as Justin mentioned earlier, the Joint Commission on Technology and Science has done some targeted review of AI use at a higher level. And so this slide just contains the list of products and briefs that their staff has presented over the past approximately year. We know that they are working on their 2026 work plan, which may include a review of AI in education. So we will keep an eye on that and work with them as appropriate. Mr. Chairman. That's everything I had planned to talk about.
Doug Rasul has a quick question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So two questions are the definition that they are using of AI, where they're pulling that from, if you have that. And then second, as to VITA's capability, do they internally have the capabilities to be able to decipher and determine privacy, or do they rely on the vendor to say, hey, our products don't do X?
Thank you, Delegate. For the AI definition, I will look that up and get right back to you. Or VITA might have it at the top of their head when they get up right after me. As far as the privacy, again, I will let VITA expand on this if they wish, but my understanding is that the AI registry is, we want to use this. There is a separate process that also goes through for additional review once it would be approved and they would be moving forward. So there would be an additional review for the business case.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Anyone else before you hear from Mr. Osmond? Okay, thanks.
All right, thank you. Nothing else? I will turn it over to Bob Osmond, the state CIO.
Mr. Osmond, welcome back.
Yes, sir. Members of the commission and Mr. Chair, happy to be here. Pleasure to discuss some of the work that we've been doing here at VITA. I also want to give thanks to the JLARC commissions and the analysts. They've done an excellent job of looking at some of the areas that we have as we strive to improve our processes. What we do, as mentioned, cybersecurity, infrastructure, governance, procurement. We do a lot of statewide work. Newly added to VITA is the Office of Data Governance and Analytics. That was part of last year's legislation, and that's working very well. We've been doing a lot of work rebuilding our staff, and so at this point we are almost fully staffed. We've rebuilt our workforce since 2022. One of the things that's remarkable about the staffing is that we've built out a lot more entry-level staff, and that is people that are new to the workforce. We felt it was very important to have a pipeline of talent, and so we've built that out. So about 25% of our staff as of this time is entry-level. we have a shared responsibility model here in Virginia. So VITA is providing a lot of the work in the infrastructure, cybersecurity, enterprise architecture, including data governance. We provide platform technologies. You see them in the middle. But a lot of the work in terms of data and applications are owned by the agency. So we work together. It's very much of a team sport for technology here in Virginia, and I think that works very well for us. And we have a lot of scope. We're doing a lot of stuff, a lot of contracts, a lot of storage. Probably the biggest area of growth is around managed storage. We're seeing increasing data year over year. That number just gets bigger and bigger, and this is in line with what's happening in most other states. So a key area is our operating model. We are one of 3 states that use an MSI model, a multi-supplier integrator model. We've done a lot of work to improve that model over the last 4 years. The messaging tower, the mainframe, our Azure cloud, managed security most recently was awarded to a new tower provider, GDIT. But we also have a lot more recompetes that are coming on the future. We're entering the 2nd generation of these large contracts. And those next recompetes that are going to happen over the next 2 to 3 years represent close to $1 billion worth of scope. So that's a lot of work that's going to have to be done right as we look at fully refreshing these service delivery towers to make sure that they continue delivering value for Virginia. We've continued our track record of good, solid work. Application modernization, building out our clouds. We're going to talk more about that later. The Project Management Center of Excellence. This was a key piece that was legislated last year. We're very happy that that is now operating. The work we've done to create a statewide app store. So how do we find ways of sharing content and sharing code more effectively? The state and local cyber grant program, and then Save Money initiative. We're all about saving money too, and we'll talk about that. We launched big plays in 2025. These were the things that we felt were really important this year, given where the state was and where we needed to focus. A lot of work around cloud adoption, planning work, dealing with more types of accelerating process and strategic sourcing so that we can have good contracts to deliver value, building out VITA, saving money, and then also the handoff. This is a year we're going to be handing off to a new administration. We need to make sure that's done right so that VITA does not lose a step in the process and that we're able to set the next administration up for success. Network, there was conversation network. It came up with the DOC presentation. We've done tremendous work building it out. Last year I reported a net increase of 1,500%. We've added another couple hundreds to that, scaling out of that network, building out the capacity. At this point, we are ready, and as was reported at the last JLARC meeting from the Office of Broadband, Dr. Holmes, she gave a great presentation in terms of availability of broadband statewide. And with the incorporation of LEOs, low Earth orbit satellite technology, the state is covered. So at this point, we have the capacity to build out every single location and put in broadband statewide. We just need the order. So the agency, if they order it, we can deliver it, but we do need that order for them to deliver. A lot of work in cloud. Last year I reported that AWS was fully built out. This year we added 3 more clouds, the Google Cloud, the Microsoft Azure, Oracle Cloud. We have agencies that are running in them. They're using serverless technology, notably VDOT, DMV, ELECT are running heavily in the Azure cloud. VDH is running in Google, and then State Police is running in Oracle. So we have a lot of agencies doing very fine work, looking to take advantage of newer technologies that they just did not have before. So that's been a key area of focus. Our cyber program continues to keep up with the threat actors that are trying to attack us. There were 591 million attack attempts against the state last year, all of which were blocked. Malware coming in, they continue to grow. This was a 5x growth over last year. What you see on the right, though, is in terms of cybersecurity incidents have gone down. This is where they actually get in, and we have to respond to it as an incident. We used to have close to 18 P1, the highest priority instances per quarter. We got that down to now to 1, which is a really remarkable result. And it's been proven by our cybersecurity insurance. Our insurance rates went down by 20% again this year, 3 years in a row. our cybersecurity insurance has gone down. Department of Treasury does an amazing job of negotiating that policy, and so the industry has reflected that the state is at a lower risk, which is good for everybody. Cyber grant program, we're rolling out trying to help our localities. Right now, as we completed the assessment work in terms of looking at 159 participating localities, we're finding that there's some opportunity to improve. We think we can get them into a higher maturity rate as we've looked at it, and we're now moving from assessment to actually delivery of capabilities. Contracts are being worked right now. This is in partnership with FEMA and CISA to help us provide this work. And this is a jointly funded. General Assembly is providing shared funding in addition to the federal funding to provide this program. AI, so this is a fun one. We've done a lot of legislative work, a lot of policy work in terms of putting out the different standards and putting in place the framework to govern AI. We've not slowed down. This is the registry process that we use in terms of taking a look at each use case as it goes through our process. If you look at the results, we've come a long way in terms of where we got started and in terms of the number of use cases that are approved in Virginia. And we're finding more and more use cases as agencies look at opportunities and try to learn about ways of taking advantage and harnessing this really powerful technology. Some of these things are things we've done already. It was mentioned earlier, chatbots, looking at claims processing, website translation. These are all very good areas. We're finding almost every commercial product has AI built into it. So, regardless of the vendor, they're doing it. They have to do it just to keep up with their competition. We have some really good AI coming in process statewide. And also in the future, every job is going to involve some kind of AI. There's just no way around it. It's just going to be part of every tech worker. They're going to be using AI as part of that job as this capability matures. Project Manager Center of Excellence, this is an area that we did talk about last year, and we've now fielded that technology. We're seeing the results. We were able to get a little bit of seed funding from the administration to help us start earlier, and that was very helpful to allow us to hire people, build some processes, build out the framework so we can hit the ground running. What we have noticed is that there have been some improvements even from the get-go. We're seeing more projects, 14% more projects, but fewer troubled projects, which is good for everybody. Fewer projects troubled projects means that we're able to deliver on our promises and accelerate value to our agencies. One of the programs I'm very happy to report is the Substance Use Disorder Analytics Platform. This is an area that we've needed attention at for a long time. This is a good example because it incorporates data from 10 different agencies. Agencies are really good at doing agency business. When you're trying to cut across multiple agencies, sometimes it's very helpful to have someone broker some of that work and pull it all together. We were able to do this with SUDA. The first release went live in October. Second release is going to go live in December, showing all kinds of data sets to really help localities that are on the front lines dealing with the opioid crisis and help them get the information they need to understand what's happening in the broader environment. So this has been a really good project for us. And again, we're very grateful for the General Assembly for providing us with the means to get it done. And then we talked earlier about SmartLing as a platform to do translation. It's currently live on most of the state websites, so you can pick the language, one of 11, and it will be immediately translated. This uses machine learning, a model called DeepL, in order to produce it. And then it also includes, in this case, some human translation as well for some of the keywords that might be a little different from context to context. So there's actually live human editors for it. And cost. I mean, all this IT stuff can sometimes be expensive. We've been very effective at keeping our budgets tight and being very frugal in terms of where do we invest and what do we invest in. And so my enterprise service budget, which I use to provide services to the agencies, has been essentially flat for the last 4 years. So we've gone up 1.6% from fiscal year 23 to 26. Compare that to inflation. What you see on the bar charts are the costs of a workstation. So there's a lot of things we do to a Vita workstation. The little teal color, that is the cost of the base workstation, the hardware. But then we also provide services on top of it, the warranties, the cybersecurity, the accounts, all those to get to the total price. But that's also been essentially flat year over year, as we've strived to not put additional costs on the burden of the agencies that we're serving. Going ahead, we're going to focus a lot more on modernization of applications, modernization of taking advantage of technologies like agentic AI. How do we help our agency partners go faster? How do we help them build out for the future? And then also, we want to close by just expressing our gratitude for the Commission and our partners to do the work that we do, and looking at some of the work around managing the future recompetes, exploiting technology, helping the new administration start strong, and then also continue doing our work with project governance. Those are all very important areas.
Okay,
as
we
look
have
ahead.
questions here. Any questions? Delegate Rasool.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just following up on the previous question about, thank you for the presentation, great information. The previous question around kind of our independent verification around the security measures, specifically with regards to AI. And the second separate question, and if you have any insight as the CIO on the advancements in, for example, quantum computing, et cetera, how that might impact our data center footprint like in a decade, because technology we think is going to rapidly catch up, but we haven't heard really from technologists like yourself, maybe the technology will take care of some of the footprint that we're worried about.
Mm-hmm. Those are excellent questions. On the first question regarding the personnel, we do assess AI projects with internal resources.
Okay.
We felt that's the best way to get unbiased focus. We do have many partners that we work with in terms of helping us learn, because AI is a very rapidly emerging area. So we work with all the major hyperscalers to understand where their products are going, understand the models that they use, the technologies as they advance. So a good part of our effort is keeping up with the technology. But we do have a very dedicated and smart team here at VITA that allow us to provide that expertise, and every one of those use cases are assessed by that team, independent of vendor participation.
Thank you.
Quantum computing is exciting. I'm very encouraged by the power of quantum computing, its ability to do work at a much higher density. So just to put it in perspective, technology is just improving rapidly. And so if you look at both the ways we store data, the ways we handle compute, we're providing more and more capacity in a smaller space. Look what's happening on mobile technologies. You find each version becoming more and more powerful. As we look at upgrading our private cloud, we're finding that we need 25% of what we needed in terms of technology from 6 to 8 years ago. Quantum computing will even further accelerate that, because that allows you to do much more computations in a much smaller footprint. We don't see it becoming mainstream just yet, but I do think it's something that we should be thinking about as we look at the space requirements. We do know that as more and more data centers require GPUs to process the data, it's much more intensive. Quantum computing can act as a way to balance it out, so maybe they would need a little less as they're doing more quantum computing
Delegate Ware.
in the future.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I did not quite catch all that Delegate Rasool asked, so I may, if I'm overlapping, my apologies. But mine is more is a general question. We are, as everybody remarks, the data center capital of the U.S. How does that affect? Does that capacity give you in VITA advantages to not having it, or what's the interaction like in that respect?
Within VITA, we do participate in those data centers are running VITA workloads. So if you look at Microsoft Azure East 1, if you look at AWS East 1, those are heavily based in Northern Virginia. And so we are operating in both of those environments, those regions. And so VITA data is flowing through. It does help us in terms of latency. By having them somewhat close by, we're able to operate transactions at a slightly faster rate than they would if we were using workloads out of, say, Ohio or West Coast, which are other regions that are available to us. to process a lot of the work that we're doing. There's a benefit.
Yes. I have a question. Are you working now with Department of Social Services in either one of their systems upgrades? And if you can be short, you can tell us what they're doing. Otherwise, you can get back to me later.
We are working directly with Department of Social Services. They are one of the agencies that we serve. I probably am not prepared to really give a detailed information about where they're at. I'm happy to look it up and follow up.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, thank you very much for coming today and sharing this with us.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay. Next, we're going to have, Kimberly.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Next, we will round out today's meeting with our annual reports on state spending and the state's economic development incentives. So Ellen Miller, our Chief Economic Development Analyst, will be providing these updates, and they will be quite short because we know the hour is getting late.
Good. So both of these things on our agenda, you can just run from one to the next. The
yes.
State spending and then the economic development issues. So,
yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, I was prepared to go fast, but I can go even faster.
Wow. Okay.
Okay. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members. As Kimberly said, my name is Ellen Miller, and I'll first cover our state spending report. This particular report covers spending trends over the last 10 years, starting in fiscal year 16 and ending in fiscal year 25. However, I'm going to start off focusing on fiscal year 25. So in fiscal year 25, Virginia's total operating budget was about $93 billion, and this is 11% higher than the fiscal year 24 budget. Most of this increase was in 4 agency budgets, including DMAS and DOE, which typically experience higher levels of year-over-year growth. UVA's budget was a major contributor to growth, mostly because of increases in patient care at its medical centers. Virginia Tax's budget was also a major contributor because of appropriations to cover the cost of the income tax rebates that were issued this fall. Oops. Okay. I went too fast. Even though the non-general fund budget is and historically has been the biggest driver of total budget growth, the general fund budget has grown at a faster rate in recent years than in the past. It grew between 13 to 15% in 3 of the last 4 fiscal years, primarily because revenues have exceeded forecasted amounts. Historically, general fund budget growth in the 20 years prior to fiscal year 21 was about 4% per year on average. It only reached 13% once during that 20-year period. Slide 5 shows the trend in how the state budget has grown over the past 10 years. And you see, if you look at the bottom line, which is the general fund budget, that budget grew at a fairly low and steady rate through fiscal year 21, but has grown at a faster rate since then. The non-general fund budget, which is the middle line, increased at a faster rate during the 10-year period overall, particularly after fiscal year 18, when Medicaid expansion was implemented. Most information in our report and presentations show growth unadjusted for inflation or population, so we like to include this slide that adjusts the budgets for these factors. And I'll focus on the general fund budget, which is the one in the middle. And when you control for inflation and population growth, the general fund budget growth reduces from 7.1% to just over 3% for the 10-year period. And Mr. Chairman, I can stop here. The rest of my presentation just lists the top 10 agencies and programs in terms of total general fund and non-general fund growth. And I will give you a preview. They are generally the same agencies that I report on every year. I'd be happy to answer any questions about that.
Okay. Any questions? There's a lot of talk about Medicaid growth, and some of that is because we've wanted to grow the program. For instance, we are now trying to reduce the priority 1 waiting list for IDDD waivers. That's expensive. That's something that we objectively try to do. It's not program out of control. We're serving more people in Medicaid, and there's other areas of Medicaid that are the same. The community health resources and the continuum of care. We boosted the money there.
Correct.
And some of that is, or at least half of it is general fund money. So we're serving more people. I just want the public to know that when they hear that Medicaid's out of control, we're caring for more people, just as a point. Please continue.
Okay, Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
That did spark one question for me. Historically, K-12 education had been this... Couldn't find just one question.
AI.
That's not AI. It wasn't quantum quite yet, but historically, K-12 had been our single largest general fund expenditure. Where is that now in relation to Medicaid, and what are those percentages, and have y'all looked at any trends with that?
Right, you're absolutely correct, Senator. DOE K through 12 education is still the top K through 12 agency in terms of general fund spending and growth as well. If you look at the slide later in my packet, and you should have it in your packets as well, it's one of the largest in terms of general fund. It's flipped around for total appropriations, but for general fund, DOE K through 12 is still at the top. And in terms of whether it continues, that's something that we haven't really looked at yet. I'll stay tuned for next year.
Okay. Any questions at this point, or you can move to the economic development incentives?
Yes, I can do that.
Thank you, Ellen.
So in terms of the Economic Development Incentives Report, this report covers high-level information on incentives awarded during the 10-year period, fiscal year 15 to fiscal year 24. And I'll move on to our key findings. And the first thing we found is that Virginia spent $5 billion on incentives between fiscal year 15 and fiscal year 24. And I especially want to note that better estimates of spending on the data center exemption and continued data center growth in the Commonwealth have resulted in very large increases in the estimates of spending on incentives since fiscal year 19. Also, the majority of incentives adopted since 2018 have been custom grants that are used to incentivize major projects like Amazon HQ2, Lego, and Micron to locate or expand in the state. Slide 4 shows how the $5 billion was distributed by type of incentive. Nearly 80% was on tax incentives, which are all the sections in blue. 17% of spending was on incentive grants, and this amount may seem small because of a number of recent custom awards, but this is because these awards are paid out over time as projects meet milestones. Slide 5 lists the 10 largest incentives in terms of spending, and the largest is by far the data center exemption, representing over half of total spending on incentives. And I'll also note that the data center estimate is an underestimate because we only have data back to fiscal year 21 for that particular exemption, and that's because that's the first year that VEDP began collecting information from all data centers that use the exemption. I'll skip over this slide that shows the recent custom grants that were awarded and focus on slide 7, which shows that annual spending on economic development incentives, it has increased some since fiscal year 19, even when you exclude the data center exemption. So the blue is certainly the data center exemption, but if you look at just the green and focus on that, you can still see a little bit of uptick. And Mr. Chairman, I'll stop here on the interest of time. The rest of my slides really focus on grant programs, but I'd be happy to address any questions.
Well, we have 4 minutes. Yeah, Senator Eben.
Wanting time to go unfilled. On the data centers, are there any takeaways in particular on the data center exemption in terms of, I believe you mentioned earlier that some of them were, not the data centers, but the incentives in general performed on slide 11, better for jobs or capital investment or wage. Are there any takeaways in general about the data center grant? I'm sure there's going to be scrutiny of that coming this session that we should be aware of.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the
On
second
slide 11, it says the majority of completed projects met their capital investment goals, but not the wage and job goals. And is that the same? Are data centers any different?
So in terms of the data center exemption, I believe most of the data centers have met their performance requirements. There are a few where there have been clawbacks, but I think if we did a similar analysis for the data center exemption, I think most of them would have met their job creation, their capital investment, and their wage goals. Otherwise, they wouldn't still continue to use the exemption. I will say, though, that for the data center exemption, there's just a minimum requirement that they have to meet. For many of the other grant programs, there's a minimum that they have to meet to be eligible. But then many of the projects have their own specific job creation goals or capital investment goals, and that determines the amount of award that they get.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Senator. I think, Mr. Greer, you have some summary comments here.
Mr. Chairman, I'll be very brief. That's all we have to present to you this morning. I would like to call your attention to the next meeting, the last meeting of the year, which will be Tuesday, December 16th at 10 a.m. At that meeting, we'll present a lot of findings to you. We'll present the findings from our review of the K-12 accountability system, our review of gun violence and the impact on communities, and our review of the state's hybrid retirement plan. So thank you very much for your attention today.
Well, terrific. Any further comments from members before we adjourn? I don't see any hands. Y'all have a great day.